Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to launch a project where we are going to help the President of the United States solve an economic crisis. Your first big assignment with that is going to be pretty straightforward. You guys are going to have to compare the current economic crisis as outlined in the letter from the President to our historical economic crises. So it's important that we take a moment and we look and see about what some of these terms mean on the statistical graph, plus, kind of a little bit of the time period history of our other economic crises. First and foremost, we have gross domestic product. Total output of the economy in all sectors makes our gross domestic product, or our GDP. Nominal is one that's not been adjusted for inflation, and real has been adjusted for inflation. Nominal is important because nominal is not there. It's the total value. All right. Real gives us actual comparison to what the value of the dollar was and what the value of the dollar wasn't. And we can take a look at inflation for that, but we could definitely see that. So GDP is the output of the total economy set forth, and we kind of measure it. It's an important figure. If I had to answer which one was more important, it gets really tough, but I'd probably argue for real. Inflation is the next one. Inflation is the sustained increase in general price of goods over a service of periods. We take a basket market of goods and we measure it and we decide that inflation has a lot to do with that consumer price index. The United States, over the last 100 years, according to your guys' need to know information, has averaged an inflation rate of 3.2%. Right, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Now that's an important kind of indication. Remember, our project tells us that we're currently experiencing an inflation rate of 9%, which is 3 times the normal amount. So it's important that we take a look and try to figure out a way for us to stop this. Inflation, we use the consumer price index to help us measure that. Okay, measurement of the price paid for a market basket of goods over a period of time. In our problem, in our scenario, what we see is definite struggle with trying to make this understanding happen, but we do use 1984 as our base year. So 1984 will equal 100, right? And then everything after 1984 will be set to 100, and everything before 1984 will be set to 100. So we kind of have an idea of what is making up that consumer price index. Unemployment is taking the total measure of people looking for work and dividing it by the total number of workers in the labor force. It's represented as a percentage. I was listening to the radio today on my way in, and I was told that the new unemployment rate has dropped to 5.6%. Or was it 5.9? I don't remember the exact percentage. But that's important because what economists are now saying is that it's not necessarily more people are getting jobs, but more people aren't looking for jobs, or more people are retiring, and that's not a sign that our economy is growing. So in our scenario, remember, we were at, I believe, 12.5% unemployment in all economic sectors, not just manufacturing, and it's important for us to take that into consideration as we start to move forward. The discount rate is the rate that the banks pay for failing to meet their reserve requirements. A low discount rate would be used in order to get people to borrow money, to take money to expand the economy. Likely see that during a depression period, where a high discount rate would be used if we are starting to kind of see the economy struggle a little bit, and we're going to try to tighten up and make sure that we don't have a massive failure. Okay. Next, we have the public debt. That's all debt owned by the central government. The United States has been in debt, according to our statistics, since 1929. I have to imagine that it goes back a little bit farther, so we're approaching at least 100 years plus of being in debt, and that's an important thing to kind of understand. One question that was posed in class is, what's the difference between running with a debt and not running with a debt? And truthfully, I don't think our government's going to change that much. We are starting to see a significant push to kind of alleviate some of the debt and to alleviate the deficit that we currently have, but I don't know that we'll ever climb out of debt. All right, I want to take a quick look at some historical economic crises. All right, I want to look and see and kind of what's there. The first big one that we're going to start off with is the Great Depression, which happened in October 1929, when people finally realized that all of the money in the stock market and how it was growing wasn't real. People were buying on margin. They didn't have all of the funds that were needed to pay for everything that they were getting. So it's important that we take the time to kind of think about that and realize that. And that's kind of what happened. We saw bank failures in the early 1930s. That was also devastating. People lost money because the banks had been investing and they had no money to give back. All right. We saw huge increases in unemployment and decreases in the GDP and inflation. So we started to kind of see this starting to happen. Our urban areas in manufacturing took the largest hits during the Great Depression. We're talking like a manufacturing city like Detroit, South Bend, even Chicago. We're seeing rates of unemployment 25% or greater during this Great Depression period. All right. After that, we see the end of World War II. We went through a slight recession as well. World War II is what's known as a total war, meaning that all manufacturing was converted over to help the war effort. We were trying to make sure that the war effort was happening and that we were going to be successful. So we saw quite a bit of that. We saw some returning GIs coming back. They're out of the service at this point. They needed to do something. That's part of the GI Bill. We started sending them to college to get those things, and you see the growth of the American university during that period as well. But with the returning GIs, you start to kind of see these people are coming back. They may not have jobs right away. Also see factory slowdowns. The people of the United States have been used to for the last 3 years at this point, not purchasing new goods and making do with what they had, and that kind of continued after the war. So we see a drop in GDP because we're no longer producing for the war. And we see steady unemployment and inflation numbers, which tells us that it wasn't that big of a recession. Last and least, we see the 1980s credit crisis. There was a contractionary policy at the Federal Reserve. So they were not lending out money easily. Credit and money were both hard to get during the early 80s. We saw trickle-down economic policies of the Reagan administration also playing a role in this. And we had little to no effect on the national economic indicators. It was just that people were struggling. And that's kind of what we see there. So I want you guys now to decide and compose a memo describing our current economic crisis and the economic crises in the past. All right, you're making an argument one way or the other, and you cannot be wrong if you support your argument. So you could take our current economic situation and compare that to, say, the Great Depression. Which one is worse? You are just making a statement and backing it up with the information that you've been given. All right, I want you guys to finish this up before class. If you guys have some extra time, make sure you guys get this done. Get it into me. Reminder, we're close to the end of the semester, and we don't have a lot of time for makeup assignments. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Take care, and I will see you soon.